Thank you, I whispered, cradling the small potted plant in my hands. The attached note simply read, "Keep growing, Dad." Three words that had taken 32 years to materialize. I traced my finger over his familiar handwriting, bold, all capitals, pressing hard enough to leave indentations on the paper, and felt tears threatening. Standing alone in my corner office on the 17th floor of the Santec Financial Headquarters in San Francisco, I watched morning fog envelop the bay as emotions warred within me. This unexpected gesture arrived exactly 1 week after I'd helped save my father's construction company from bankruptcy, the company he never thought I was capable of understanding because finance is just pushing numbers around on a computer. The plant was a peace offering, not an apology, not explicit praise, but in my family's language of stifled emotions and practical gestures, it might as well have been a 10-page letter of admiration. For Frank Foster, admitting he needed his daughter's help had been nearly impossible. Accepting that help, even harder. Acknowledging its value with a gift, unprecedented. 6 months ago, I'd been sitting in a corporate bathroom stall at my promotion celebration in Chicago, mascara streaming down my face while colleagues popped champagne in the conference room. "Sorry, Ellen. Your father's got that important client golf game. You understand, right? It's business." My mother had texted 30 minutes before the event. The familiar pain of invisibility had washed over me yet again. How did I get from there to here? From dutiful daughter desperately seeking approval to a woman who finally understood her own worth? The journey wasn't linear. It never is when you're untangling yourself from patterns established before you could form complete sentences. But perhaps it began in earnest that day in the bathroom, when my colleague Sarah knocked gently and said the words that would become my mantra: "The people who can't celebrate you don't deserve to define you." Flashback: the overlooked child. Growing up in the Chicago suburbs, I was the odd one out in my family before I even understood what that meant. My father, Frank, had built his small construction company through sheer determination and calloused hands. He measured success in concrete things: buildings completed, contracts signed, profits banked. My mother, Mary, had abandoned her own ambitions to become his devoted support system and the neighborhood's most reliable gossip network node. Their world was practical, immediate, and tangible. Mine existed in books, ideas, and potential. Ellen's daydreaming again. My mother would sigh at dinner when I'd been lost in thoughts about college applications rather than listening to neighborhood updates. My father would barely look up from his plate. "Real life doesn't happen in your head, Ellie." My younger brother Alex, 4 years my junior, was everything I wasn't: practical, sports-oriented, and explicitly interested in taking over Dad's business someday. Their approval of him was as visible as their confusion about me. When I brought home straight A's on my report card, the response was predictable. "That's nice," Mom would say, already turning back to her magazine. "Grades don't build character," Dad would add, ruffling Alex's hair. "Now, winning that hockey championship like your brother, that teaches you about life." I'd retreat to my room, where textbooks and college brochures were hidden under my bed like contraband. Each achievement became a private victory, celebrated in silence. When I was accepted into Northwestern's economics program on a partial scholarship, I rehearsed telling them for days. College. My father had looked genuinely confused at dinner. "What's wrong with community college if you want a degree so badly?" Or better yet, "I could teach you bookkeeping for the company." He speared a potato. "Paying for some professor to tell you what to think is throwing money away." My mother added hesitantly, "Honey, wouldn't it be better to find a nice boy and settle down? All that student debt for what? You'll just end up raising kids anyway." I pushed my food around my plate. "The scholarship covers 60% of tuition. I'll work for the rest." "60% still leaves 40% we don't have," Dad replied, ending the discussion. But I went anyway. I worked 3 jobs, applied for every scholarship and grant available, and lived on ramen and coffee. Each semester felt like climbing a mountain with inadequate gear, but I made it. 4 years later, I graduated summa cum laude with a degree in economics and a job offer from Chicago's third largest financial firm. The pattern had been set. My achievements would be minimized, my choices questioned. Yet something in me kept hoping for the breakthrough moment when they'd finally see me, when my father would look at me with the same pride he showed when Alex made a successful tackle on the football field. The breaking point. It's just a promotion, Ellen. Everyone gets promoted eventually if they stay somewhere long enough. My mother's voice echoed through my memory as I sat at my desk in Chicago, staring at the email announcing my advancement to Director of Financial Analysis. 8 years of 60-hour weeks, nights and weekends sacrificed, and innovative strategies that had saved clients millions, all reduced to staying somewhere long enough. The promotion ceremony was scheduled for Friday evening. Department heads would attend. The CEO would give a speech. My team had prepared a presentation on our latest project success. I'd been asked to invite family members. They won't come, Sarah said during our lunch break, her eyes gentle but honest. Her 7-year-old daughter's artwork decorated her cubicle, each new crayon creation proudly displayed and praised. You know that, right? Dad has that golf tournament, I said mechanically. Mom doesn't like driving in the city. Sarah set down her fork. Ellen, I've known you for 6 years. Every recital, every game, every school event, I've never once seen your parents attend. My ex-husband was garbage, but even he shows up for Madison's science fairs. I felt my defenses rise. They're busy. Dad's company. Stop. Her directness startled me. Your father rescheduled that client meeting last month when your brother needed help moving into his new apartment. The truth of her words stung like alcohol on an open wound. I'd helped Alex move too, taking a rare personal day. Dad had not only shown up but brought 3 workers from his construction crew to make it go faster. He's establishing his independence. Dad had said proudly, surveying Alex's starter home, purchased with a generous down payment gift I knew my parents couldn't really afford. That evening, I sent the invitation anyway. Formal, printed on heavy stock paper. Ellen Foster cordially invites you to celebrate her promotion to Director of Financial Analysis. I included details about parking, suggestions for hotels if they wanted to stay overnight, and restaurant recommendations. I even offered to pay for their accommodations. 3 days later, my mother called. We got your invitation, honey. So official. Your father says congratulations. Hope flickered. So you'll come? A pause. Well, it's just. That's the weekend of the Baxter client meeting. Your father's been trying to land this contract for months. It's very important for the company's future. This ceremony is at 6 p.m. The dinner ends by 9. Couldn't he meet the client earlier? Ellen, you know how these things go. Golf, then drinks. It's an all-day affair. Business relationships take time. Her voice brightened artificially. But I'm sure it will be lovely. Take pictures for us. I gripped the phone tighter. Mom, this is important to me. This promotion, it's a big deal. The youngest director in company history. Of course it is, honey. Her voice took on the placating tone she'd used throughout my childhood. We're very proud. It's just terrible timing. After we hung up, I sat motionless in my apartment, surrounded by financial reports and strategy documents. In that moment, something crystallized. A pattern I'd been too close to see clearly, like trying to discern an image in a mosaic while standing with your nose against the tiles. The night of the ceremony arrived. The conference room had been transformed with elegant decorations. Colleagues brought their spouses, parents, even children. I'd reserved 3 chairs in the front row, unable to shake the irrational hope that my parents and brother might surprise me. As the evening progressed, those empty seats became impossible to ignore, drawing concerned glances from colleagues who knew me well. When the CEO called me to the podium, praising my extraordinary contributions and remarkable talent, I smiled professionally and delivered my prepared remarks. Inside, a small voice kept whispering, if I'm so remarkable, why am I not remarkable enough for them? The bathroom breakdown came after, when Sarah found me. I'd excused myself as champagne was being poured, emotions suddenly too thick in my throat to swallow. They didn't even call to say good luck, I confessed between sobs, seated on the closed toilet lid. Not even a text. Sarah leaned against the stall door. The people who can't celebrate you don't deserve to define you, she said quietly. I learned that the hard way with Rick. Some people are constitutionally incapable of seeing beyond their own needs and expectations. But they're my parents, I whispered. Shouldn't they be different? Should be and are biggest gap in the universe. She handed me a tissue. What would you tell one of your team members if their family treated them this way? I knew the answer immediately. That they deserve better. That their worth isn't determined by people who can't recognize their value. Exactly. Sarah's eyes met mine in the mirror as I repaired my makeup. So why don't you deserve the same advice you'd give someone else? That night changed everything. Not dramatically, not all at once, but like water beginning to seep through small cracks in a dam. The pressure had been building for decades. Now, it had found an outlet. 2 weeks later, when the offer came to lead a new division in San Francisco, I felt none of the usual anxiety about my parents' reaction. For the first time, their opinion wasn't the first consideration in my mind. Instead, I thought about the opportunity, the challenge, the chance to build something new in a city where I could reinvent myself. When I called to tell them, my mother's response was predictable. San Francisco? That's so far. And it's so expensive. Wouldn't Chicago be better for your career? At least here you have family. Family. The word hit differently now. It's an incredible opportunity, Mom. I'd be establishing a new sustainable investment division. Your father won't like this, she warned, her go-to phrase when uncomfortable with direct confrontation. He was just saying the other day that you should consider coming back to help with the company books. Alex is taking on more responsibility, and he could use support with the financial side. The old me would have felt the familiar tug of obligation. The new me recognized the pattern for what it was. I've already accepted the position, I said firmly. I start in 3 weeks. The ensuing silence contained multitudes. New beginnings. San Francisco embraced me with its fog and hills and eclectic energy. My company provided temporary housing, offered panoramic views of the bay, a metaphorical distance that matched the geographical one I'd put between myself and Chicago. Each morning, I stood at my window watching ferries cross the water, feeling the unfamiliar lightness of being answerable primarily to myself. I threw myself into building my new department. Leadership suited me. I discovered a talent for inspiring teams, for seeing the big picture while honoring the details. My boss, Caroline, became a mentor, showing me what was possible for a woman who refused to apologize for her ambition. Your analytical skills are exceptional, she told me during my first performance review. But what sets you apart is your emotional intelligence. You understand people as well as you understand numbers. I thought of my father, who had always dismissed my career as just pushing numbers around. He had never understood that financial analysis was really about understanding human behavior, predicting patterns, seeing the stories behind the figures. Months passed in productive blur. I found an apartment in a historic building with bay windows and hardwood floors. I made friends, cautiously at first, then with increasing openness. My colleague Peter became my regular lunch companion, a divorced father of two in his early 40s who understood the complexity of family relationships. My parents didn't speak to me for 2 years after my divorce. He confided over dim sum. In their culture, divorce was unthinkable. They said I dishonored the family. How did you reconcile? I asked, genuinely curious. He smiled slightly. My daughter got sick, nothing serious, but enough to scare everyone. My mother showed up at the hospital with soup. No apologies, no discussion of the past. Just soup. He shrugged. Sometimes the breakthrough comes in unexpected ways. I nodded, thinking of my father, who showed affection through practical assistance rather than words, who had taught me to change a tire and check oil levels because you never know when you'll be stranded somewhere. His form of love was preparation for adversity, not celebration of success. 4 months into my San Francisco life, the call came that would change everything again. Not from my parents, but from Alex. Ellen? My brother's voice sounded strained. Do you have a minute? It's about Dad's company. I sat straighter at my desk. What's wrong? Everything. He exhaled heavily. The Anderson project went sideways. Structural issues they're blaming on us. The client is withholding payment and threatening legal action. Two other clients got nervous and pulled their contracts. The bank's freezing our line of credit until it's resolved. He paused. Dad won't admit it, but we're weeks away from bankruptcy. My mind immediately shifted into analytical mode. Has he consulted with a financial advisor? A bitter laugh. You know, Dad, no pencil pusher is going to tell me how to run my business. He's meeting with his buddy Jack tonight, who apparently knows a guy who saved his cousin's restaurant. I closed my eyes. Typical. How bad are the numbers? I'm not sure. Dad keeps the books close, even from me. But Ellen. His voice dropped. He's not sleeping. Mom says he's talking about selling the house. The house my father had renovated himself. The house he'd planned to retire in. This was serious. Dad's birthday is this weekend, Alex continued. Mom's planning a small dinner. Maybe if you came home, you could offer some advice. I felt the familiar tug of family obligation, but now was tempered with something else, genuine concern mixed with professional interest. This was a problem I was uniquely qualified to solve. If only my father would let me. I'll check flights, I said finally. Confrontation and connect. The suburban Chicago neighborhood looked smaller than I remembered. My parents' house, once the crown jewel of the block, showed subtle signs of neglect, gutters slightly askew, flower beds overgrown, paint beginning to peel at the corners. My father had always been meticulous about maintenance. This visible decline spoke volumes. My mother opened the door before I could knock, her face lighting up with genuine pleasure. Ellen, you're here. Her hug felt desperate, clinging. She'd aged in the months since I'd left, more gray at her temples, deeper lines around her eyes. Hi, Mom. I returned her embrace, breathing in her familiar rose-scented perfume. Where's Dad? Her smile dimmed slightly. In his office. Been in there most days since. She gestured vaguely. You know. The trouble. I found him hunched over his desk, surrounded by paper invoices, receipts, and printouts of email exchanges. He looked up when I entered, surprise briefly crossing his face before his expression settled into something more guarded. Ellen. Didn't know you were coming. Happy birthday, Dad. I set my carry-on by the door. Alex mentioned the celebration. He grunted, returning to his papers. Not much to celebrate this year. I studied him silently. The proud man who had built his business from nothing now looked diminished, shoulders curved inward as if bearing an invisible weight. For the first time, I saw my father as simply a man, not the towering figure of my childhood or the dismissive parent of my young adulthood, but a human being facing the potential collapse of everything he'd built. Alex mentioned some problems with the Anderson project, I said carefully. His head snapped up. Your brother talks too much. He shuffled papers unnecessarily. It's just a cash flow issue. Temporary. I moved closer, glancing at the disorganized financial statements. Immediately, I spotted concerning patterns, declining revenue, increasing costs, dangerously low cash reserves. Dad, I work with companies in financial distress every day. If you let me look at your books, I don't need my daughter telling me how to run the business I built before she was born, he interrupted sharply. Just because you've got some fancy title doesn't mean you understand the real world of construction. The familiar dismissal stung, but differently now. I recognized it for what it was. Fear masked as pride, vulnerability disguised as anger. You're right, I said, surprising him. I don't know construction, but I do know finance. And right now, you don't need a contractor. You need a financial analyst. He stared at me, conflict evident in his expression. Dad, I continued gently, would you refuse medical advice from a doctor just because they haven't experienced your specific illness? Finance is my expertise. At least let me see if I can help before you make major decisions like selling the house. He looked away, jaw working. After a long moment, he pushed a worn ledger toward me. Company books, he said gruffly. Such as they are. That night, after a birthday dinner where we carefully avoided discussing business, I stayed up analyzing years of financial records. The picture was both better and worse than I'd feared. My father's company wasn't fundamentally unsound. It had weathered recessions and building slumps before. But his financial management was chaotic, his pricing structure outdated, and his capital allocation inefficient. Most critically, he'd signed contracts without adequate protection against the very type of dispute he now faced. By morning, I had drafted 3 potential recovery strategies and identified immediate steps to stabilize cash flow. When I presented them at breakfast, I expected resistance. Instead, to my shock, my father listened silently, asking occasional clarifying questions that revealed a sharper understanding than he'd previously admitted. This dispute resolution approach, he said, pointing to my second option. You really think the Andersons would go for partial payment now in exchange for extended warranty terms? I nodded. It gives them more long-term security while giving you immediate cash flow. Their main concern is structural integrity, so an extended warranty addresses their fear directly. He considered this, then looked at me with an expression I'd never seen before, something close to respect. When did you get so good at understanding what makes people tick? Probably around the same time I realized financial analysis is really about human behavior, not just numbers, I answered honestly. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Huh. The next 3 days became an intensive collaboration. I reorganized my father's financial systems, created templates for future contracts with better protection clauses, and negotiated directly with the Andersons' representatives. By the time I needed to return to San Francisco, we had secured partial payment, restructured 2 other contracts, and established a clear path toward recovery. On my last evening, my father and I sat on the back porch, the way we had when I was small, and he would point out constellations while drinking his single allowed beer of the day. Your mother says I should thank you, he said abruptly, staring at the darkening sky. I smiled slightly. But that would require admitting you needed help. He shot me a sideways glance, surprised by my directness. Something like that. He was quiet for a long moment. I always figured you looked down on what I do. All that education, big city job. Dad, I became a financial analyst because of you. The words surprised me even as I spoke them, but I recognized their truth immediately. Watching you worry about making payroll, seeing how seasonal downturns stressed you out, I wanted to understand money so it wouldn't control us the way it sometimes controlled you. He considered this, rolling his bottle between his palms. Never thought of it that way. After another silence, he added, I still think you work too much. All those hours staring at spreadsheets can't be healthy. I laughed softly. Says the man who works 6-day weeks 9 months of the year. That's different, he protested, but with a hint of self-awareness that was new. That's physical work. And brain work isn't real work? I challenged gently. He looked at me, really looked at me, perhaps for the first time. Your mother and I, we didn't know what to do with you. Always in your head, always thinking about things we couldn't see or understand. He took a slow breath. Scared us a little, if I'm being honest. Felt like you were moving into a world where we couldn't follow. The admission stunned me. I had interpreted their dismissal of my achievements as lack of interest or respect. It had never occurred to me that it might be rooted in insecurity, fear of the distance my education and career were creating between us. I never wanted to leave you behind, I said quietly. I just needed to find my own way. He nodded, staring into his beer. I know that now. When I left the next morning, there were no dramatic declarations, no emotional breakthroughs. My father handed me a folder with his updated business documents and said gruffly, I labeled everything the way you showed me. From him, this was the equivalent of a standing ovation. My mother hugged me tightly at the door. He stayed up until midnight organizing those files, she whispered. I've never seen him care about paperwork before. On the flight back to San Francisco, I reflected on the subtle shifts in our family dynamic. Nothing was resolved. Decades of misunderstanding and emotional distance couldn't be healed in one weekend. But something had changed. For the first time, we had connected through our strengths rather than focusing on our differences. A week later, the small potted plant arrived at my office with its 3-word note, Keep growing, Dad. From a man who had never directly praised me, never explicitly acknowledged my achievements, this was a revolution in 3 simple words. I placed the plant in my office window where morning sunlight would reach it. Like the relationship with my family, it would require care and attention, patience, and appropriate boundaries. Some days it would thrive, others it might struggle. But it was alive, growing, and that was enough for now. That evening, I called my brother. Hey, Alex. I've been thinking about Dad's business software. Would you have time for a virtual session this weekend? I found a system that might be easier for him to use. My brother's surprised laugh warmed me. You're still helping? Even after all the years I'm not doing it for him, I interrupted gently. I'm doing it because it's something I'm good at that can make a difference. And maybe because I finally understand that his inability to appreciate my path wasn't really about me at all. Family relationships, like financial systems, can be restructured. Not erased, not completely rebuilt, but reorganized to function more effectively with better protections against old patterns of damage. The equation is complex, the variables numerous, but the principle is sound. Invest where there's potential for growth, protect against known vulnerabilities, and always maintain enough emotional capital to weather unexpected storms. I am my father's daughter after all, practical at heart, just in a different currency. Epilogue 6 months later. The quarterly department heads meeting concluded with unexpected news. Caroline approached my desk afterward, elegantly professional as always. The Chicago branch is struggling, she said without preamble. The analysis division particularly. The board is considering restructuring. I nodded, understanding the implications. Market volatility had hit several of our regional offices hard. They need someone who understands both the corporate culture and the Chicago market, she continued. Someone with leadership experience and innovative approaches. Her eyes held mine steadily. Your name came up. Chicago. The city I'd left to escape patterns that no longer served me. The place where my family, complicated, flawed, but evolving, still lived. It would be a significant promotion, Caroline added. Regional Director. Your own division to structure as you see fit. Once, I would have made this decision based primarily on what others expected, moving away to prove independence or staying to fulfill obligation. Now, I considered the opportunity on its own merits and how it aligned with the life I wanted to build. Let me think about it, I said. That evening, I called my father. Not for permission, not for approval, but for the practical perspective that was his unique gift. They want me to head the Chicago office, I said after brief preliminaries. A pause. That a step up? Significant one. More responsibility, bigger team. Huh. Another pause. Your mother would be pleased. She misses you. I smiled, noting what remained unsaid. And you? He cleared his throat. Well, the Anderson situation has stabilized, but I could use someone to look over the new contract template occasionally. It beat. If you weren't too busy with your real job. Translation. I miss you too. I haven't decided yet, I said truthfully. There are professional considerations. Of course. His voice carried new respect. You'll analyze it properly. When we hung up, I stood at my window watching the San Francisco fog roll in, obscuring it then revealing the bay in ethereal patterns. The path forward wasn't obvious, wasn't dictated by old scripts of rebellion or compliance. For the first time, I could make this choice from a place of strength, knowing my worth wasn't determined by geography or proximity to family approval. Whatever I decided, I would be choosing from freedom rather than fear. The plant on my windowsill had grown 3 new leaves. Small progress, but steady. Growth, I was learning, rarely happens in dramatic bursts. Most often, it unfolds in quiet persistence, one leaf at a time.